thank you for coming. My colleague Chris Millette would tell you if he were moderating, you've come to the right panel this afternoon. So we're talking about, it's actually not on the screen. We're talking about methods of community engagement and public safety. And so when you, in framing, communities already do most of this work. And when you look at the role of communities in public safety, community norms, community standards, community processes, and what academics call informal social control, these are important in the work because they play a role of backing up the police, not supplanting the work of police, but backing up police without being disrespectful to the work of police. And community ownership of public safety is a target that we should all reach for and attain. And so we have today Bree Spencer, Mama Nia, who was fantastic, Bree Spencer, Ruth Rollins, Christopher Millette, and Claudia, I always forget her, it's hyphenated, Gross Shader. They're here with us today, and they're going to talk about the work that they do in their community and the community work, which makes public safety community owned. And before I even get started, this morning, Mama Nia says the attorney in the back row. It's interesting, last night, a colleague of ours in Chicago, Deb, came up to me and she was talking about one of her greatest fears. And she's a white woman, she has adopted a black child, two children, but one of her children is a black boy. And she said, you know, Paul, one of the greatest fears that I have is I'm a mother of a black boy. I've raised grown children who are okay, but I love and adore this kid. One of the greatest joys of my life, but one of the greatest fears of my life. And Mama Nia, this morning, when you got up, I'm not the guy who texts in sessions, but I quickly pulled out my phone, and Deb, I think we were texting each other at the same time. It's amazing how that conversation can happen over dinner, but then it's like Mama Nia was expressing what those of us who are raising black boys in this country at this time feel. Mama Nia, thank you for inspiring us, and part of what you did this morning helps us to aspire to go higher. Why don't you kick us off and talk about the work you do?
Thank you. Can y'all hear me? Okay. I want to thank everyone for the applause. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm a little nervous. I'm on Benadryl, so I'm going to stick with my notes because who knows what else I might say. I didn't take it before my performance, though. I took it after. But it's I'm really grateful to be here. It's kind of quite a notion that I am leading the panel first. I'm not sure whether it's because it was a random choice or because I'm probably the person furthest to the left of anything in this room. So that being said, I'm going to ask you all to remember what we did this morning, and if I say something that just makes you feel awful, just take a deep breath and go to that space and know that we are all here together to make a difference in the community. So Spirit House is a cultural arts and organizing tribe. We say tribe because our work is rooted in the customs, the cultures, the practices, and the rituals of our community. And we are in a daily practice of strengthening what accountability looks like in our homes, in our workplace, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, with our elected officials, with law enforcement and with other folks in our communities. We understand that this work is actually about our lives, right? So it's not a 9-to-5 thing for us. And that if we're expecting our community members to do this intense work of shifting their behaviors and their cultural practices, that they have to see us in this practice every day, right? You don't want your personal trainer drinking a green juice, while y'all are at the gym and eating a Twinkie later. So we do the best that we can to be examples of what this practice is. So we've been leading something that we call the Harm-Free Zone movement in the South for the past 10 years. It's a community accountability model that's intended to reduce and eventually eliminate the need for law enforcement. So there's that first trigger that I was talking about. Take a deep breath, because yes, I did say the word eliminate. It's a notion, but it's something that we believe in. So the harm-free zone, this process is complex, it's long-term, and it's incremental because we understand that before expecting community members to reduce their reliance on law enforcement, that we have to uncover and encourage accountability strategies and practices that are rooted in a fundamental belief that we hold very dear. And this is the belief that no one gets left behind, that no one is disposable, that no one gets thrown away, ever. And we mean ever. So that's a tough thing to think about, right? We've all been conditioned to believe that safety is what I said earlier, that safety is about policing, right? This idea that safety is more than just the absence of violence is not something that we have all come to understand or been conditioned to believe. And so we've also been conditioned to believe that people who commit violence, who commit acts of harm, should be removed from our communities, usually by incarceration. But the thing is that many of us know we come from families who have been impacted on both sides. I come from a family that has been impacted on both sides, both from people who have been harmed and people who do harm. I have lost loved ones to senseless violence, and I have lost loved ones to cages. And so what we know is that these cages have not done what folks have taught us that they've done, right? They have not made us any safer. They have not done anything to heal the things that are happening in the communities. They're not the things that are working on either side of where harm happens. And so this is why we do the approach that we do, that says that this retributive system actually is not the thing that's going to save us. And that sending our loved ones away both destabilizes our families, and it has also been devastating for our communities. And when you think about some of the communities that we work in, where folks are poor, where folks are over-policed, where there's joblessness, folks have records and they can't get a job, it has been devastating. The war on drugs has devastated our communities. And so we're not, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to hold off on that piece because I don't need y'all to keep deep breathing. So our harm-free zone work focuses on transforming harm through prevention, intervention, and repair. And we do this at both the interpersonal level and at the state level. So a lot of programs, there's like restorative justice programs and things out here, they're wonderful. And they are already doing the work of helping to repair harm interpersonally and in community so that folks don't have to rely on law enforcement. But they don't necessarily go far enough, which is what we try to do at the institutional level, and hold the institutions of the police, the sheriff, the court systems accountable for the harms that they have caused, with the expectation that they will do what's necessary to repair the harm. The same expectation that we have of community members to work together to repair harm that they do to each other, we have that same expectation of the folks who are in leadership, right? Our city officials, our law enforcement. So how do we do this? There are three components of the harm-free zone. One is the direct training for community members. One is something that we call that we do is called our citywide book study. We can't just train folks who have been impacted because we have an entire city. And so we also have to move folks who are not directly impacted to a place where we can have a shared language and a shared understanding. So our citywide book study is made up of churches and community groups and neighborhoods, nonprofits, people who are not necessarily directly impacted by violence every day. And it has really been positive in our community. It has helped us to move the conversation along so that when we do our third piece, which is to hold, again, our city officials accountable to who they say they are and what they say they're going to do. When we call folks out to come to a city council meeting, or when we call folks out to come to a courtroom and support a community member, we have the most diverse group of people in the room. Oftentimes people are shocked. So you have a gang member sitting next to a church mom or a grandmother, white-haired white woman who's sitting right there alongside this person who, before they participated in this kind of a book study process, now understands the context of why we are doing what we're doing and is willing to be in that process with us. And so, like I said, the third component is our community organizing, where we do what we need to do to get the policies that are going to be beneficial for our people implemented. And I have to say that Durham is doing an okay job. So in 2014, we began a 15-week training of diverse group of community members, like I said, low-wage workers, formerly incarcerated people, business owners, church moms, students, and retirees. And we took them through a 15-week participatory process that included lots of art, home-cooked meals, an in-depth historical analysis of systemic and institutional racism, and a group visioning process where they created a Durham that was accountable for all of its residents. Now, this might sound easy or fun because I said, art and meals, but it was not. It was not easy. People did not want to talk to each other at first, but they stayed, which was really important. And then we have had times where this process has been real-time tested. So on Halloween of that year, 2 of our participants were taken to the county jail. I got a phone call. They had been pulled over and they were being taken to the county jail. I sent out a text message, and within an hour there was about 50 people, friends, families, community members, some of them in their Halloween costumes, who came out to the county jail and sat in the lobby. Now the sheriffs, they did not understand what was happening. These people had gotten pulled over. They didn't understand why we were all there. And we told them that we were there waiting for our people. We had hugs, we had food, and we waited for our people to come out. And we gave them their hugs, and we took them home. While we were sitting there, I had a conversation with another one of our group members, a young man who himself had had some negative encounters with the police and had spent some time in prison. And he talked about how it felt coming out of a holding cell, how much shame he had, and how sad and how alone he was. And we discussed how healing it could be to come out of a room to a room filled with people who loved you, people who understood that you were more than just what happened in that moment, and what it could mean for folks that he knew returning from prison to believe that their communities and that their family believed that they had a right to heal and to feel safe, that doesn't happen anywhere, and how impactful it could be and how much he wanted to be able to be in leadership to make sure that happened. And so these 3 young people that I've just given you an example of are leaders in this work that we're doing in Durham. So you're hearing me talk about it, but the people who are leading this work are the ones that have been directly impacted by this. So over the years, we've definitely had shifts in Durham regarding both the way that the communities, as I said earlier, who are not directly impacted now view violence that's happening in our neighborhoods and what their role is in it. The people who are directly impacted by violence in our neighborhoods every day, through the healing work that we're doing, are beginning to view themselves differently. They're viewing each other differently, and they're doing some work around how they view their interactions with the police. And finally, there are definitely shifts in the policies and the laws that have been enforced in our community. So we had 5 policy recommendations that we made in 2012 that addressed the disparate impact of the police stops, marijuana arrests, and also we've been doing some work around excessive force. When we first started to push these policies, our police department called us detractors, did all kinds of, said we were lying, said, that it was only a bunch of mothers whose kids were in prison and that they didn't want to do anything around what we recommended. But we took the city through a 6-month education process around the war on drugs and its impact. And at the end of that, our Human Relations Commission said that racism was embedded in the Durham Police Department. And so the policies that we had put forward to them had to be adopted. And the city worked, and it was work for them. It was work for the city manager, it was work for the chief, it was work for the city council to actually adopt and implement the policies that we recommended. But it happened. It happened, and so we're really proud of that, and we're still doing what we need to do to hold them accountable for what happened. And the police also see us differently now. So one other example is one of the young men that I was talking about earlier. There was a domestic dispute happening in his community, and one of the people called him. And he got there around the same time as the police got there. And the police looked to him and asked him what he wanted them to do. This is someone who they have arrested in the past, someone who they have harassed in the past. And they looked at him and said, "What should we do?" And he said, "Go on, I got this." And he handled that domestic dispute. And he made sure that everyone got what they needed and that it was safely done. And so, they know that we're going to show up now. Because we do. We'll fill a courtroom, we'll fill the courthouse, the lobbies, we'll do it. And so they're beginning also to make different decisions, some of them, to make different decisions, to use that discretion that I'm hearing you all say these last couple of days, to not arrest people. And so, we're really proud of that. So the last point I'm going to make is that creating a harm-free zone, which is what we're talking about, requires that we show up for people who have been harmed, to help them to heal, to help them to find their voice, to help them to move forward. But we also have to show up and be responsible, we as community members, for the people who have done harm. As we learned earlier, oftentimes they're victims also, and they belong to us. And so our work is to make sure that we are working on both sides, with those who have been harmed and those who have caused harm, so that we can ultimately reduce and eventually eliminate, maybe not in my lifetime, but our need for having to have law enforcement be the answers for our social problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Bree.
Seemed important. Hello? Hello. Closer to my face, a good idea. I do have the PowerPoint. Oh. That I just turned off, you guys. That's awesome. Hey, all right. So I work for an organization called Safe and Sound. We work in Milwaukee. Basically, we started in 1998, quick flash history, and we've been evolving over time ever since. There's been some changes in the way we do our work. The latest iteration of that evolution started in the fall of 2013 when we did a year-long strategic planning process. And anyone who works at a nonprofit knows sometimes that means nothing at all, right? Hey, that's a cool binder on my shelf. I'm never going to read again. But luckily for us, in this instance, it was actually a real thing. So we had a real conversation with ourselves amongst board members, funders, community members that we worked with, God help us, local politicians, faith-based community. I see that smile, Paul. And we tried to have an honest conversation about what are we doing well and what are we doing poorly. What can we do better? How do we stop this mission creeping nonsense, which is cannibalizing our ability to work effectively in the community? And so we implemented that strategic plan starting in 2015, and that's what I'm going to talk about now is what our sort of structure and updated mission and vision look like and what we've been up to. And I have to remember to advance the slides. So our updated mission is we unite residents, youth, law enforcement, and community resources to build safe and empowered neighborhoods. And our vision, our aspirational vision, is a safe neighborhood for everyone in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is the most segregated metro area in the country. The roots of racism, discrimination, and oppression go deep here, and they still exist. And so for us, that vision, our vision, is a safe neighborhood for everyone in Milwaukee, is a strong statement that flies in the face of some of the casual racism and systemic racism we see all the time. We are a city. It's our city. And so we want to navigate as such. It's a very diverse town. It's about 40% white, about 40% African American, probably 37% to 40%, about 15 to 17% Latino, and then there's a few other groups, like we have some Hmong families, we have some Karen families, and our staff reflects that diversity, which is something I'm really proud of. And is like essential, I think, also to doing the work effectively. Okay, so here is our structure. So we're going to start on the, I guess, your left, my right. So basically, Safe and Sound's theory of change / philosophy has always been that there are 3 essential stakeholder groups necessary for building sustainable change in neighborhood safety. That adult residents, youth residents, and law enforcement are all important to that puzzle, the piece of that puzzle, and that if any one of those groups is missing, it's gonna, at least under the current structure of how things are working, that it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, to make some kind of sustained change. So we built our staffing structure. 2 of those 3 staffing positions were already in place, but we created also a youth organizing position. So basically we have teams of 3 that are in the police districts that we're assigned to, and we have 2 priority neighborhoods in each police district that are determined based on crime, housing, like renter versus ownership, and then community assets, organizations that are on the ground in those neighborhoods doing good work. And so each of those teams has a community organizer who works with adult residents, a youth organizer that works with youth. These are adults who have youth work experience and go out and work in the community with young people. And then we have something called a CPU coordinator, which is essentially a civilian who's hired by Safe and Sound, who works out of a police department. And they work out of the police station as a member of a specialized unit that it's not, it takes typically 3 to 7 officers off of traditional patrolling duty and puts them on a special team that works on nuisance, long-term chronic problems that like public safety, regular policing doesn't address. I used to, full disclosure, this is the position I did when I started at Safe and Sound, so I'm going to try not to talk too much about it. It is near and dear to my heart. But essentially, we value and want people in that role who are maintaining their perspective as a civilian. There's already enough law enforcement on the team. We need someone with a different perspective and a different understanding of what's going on to be advocating for resident concerns from within the police district. Now, there was a really great panel earlier today, and here Miss Lewis was speaking, Sherry Lewis from Birmingham, who I've never met, but I feel I know her in spirit. She sounds like an incredible community leader. Thank God for Miss Lewis, right? So one of the things she talked about was follow-up. For a lot of residents, making a complaint to law enforcement is like throwing a penny in a well, and they never know what happens. The system could even, in fact, be working in their favor, right? The problem could get addressed, but nobody ever tells them why the problem got addressed. There's an after-set house next to me. It's every night. I cannot sleep. My kids cannot sleep. Something needs to be addressed by that. And then give it a couple weeks, maybe it goes away. But no one ever calls up and says, thank you for the information. Thank you that there's an issue. We're going to handle it. So the CPU coordinator can help provide follow-up, which is something that traditional contemporary American policing is not set up to do. Officers are answering that radio 24/7. There's no system for building relationships or getting back to people. So the coordinator can provide kind of that focus. They can also be, in Milwaukee, we have this unique arrangement, which only recently got formalized, which is that residents can call and give complaint information to the coordinator. The coordinator can actually withhold their personal information and pass the complaint on to the officers. The officers understand that that's the relationship, and over time the goal is to build relationship, but it gives people access to service that they might not otherwise feel comfortable tapping into. So those 3 work together to try to get their constituent groups and help and support their constituent groups working together. And then we're very informed by Robert Samson's work in Chicago. So one of his key findings from his study, which is in the Great American City and is like this really big longitudinal study on neighborhood stability, one of his key findings is collective efficacy and concentrated disadvantage are the 2 biggest predictors for crime and safety in a neighborhood. So Safe and Sound works on building collective efficacy, that's connections between people and increasing or helping people who want to intervene when they see something they like to change in their neighborhood. And then we try to make partnerships with people who do concentrated disadvantage work. These are direct social service type agencies and people who do, frankly, advocacy work to try to change policies around what's wrong. And there's a lot that's wrong. So rather than trying to do all of this ourselves, we're trying to build real, meaningful partnerships with organizations who are doing the meaningful on-the-ground route, grassroots, on-the-ground route, really, to make a difference. Like if we were so blessed to have a spirit house or something, we would try to make sure that people who had a certain need or wanted to see a certain thing knew NIA and knew how to get access and go. So that's that, and now I will move the slide. Okay, our community engagement strategies are legion. There's a lot. There's a couple pictures here of some of them that are kind of fun. We do a lot of events and meetings. We meaningfully participate in community meetings, and we also help to facilitate meetings and events. So examples here are we've had some youth councils at schools. We have something called Barbershop Mondays, which is essentially barbershops are closed on Mondays, so that's when barbers can typically, at least in Milwaukee, that's when they can typically volunteer their time, and we'll get a couple of barbers who will come out, set up some stools at a youth center or community center, and cut hair for free. And we get a pretty wide spectrum of ages, so we get young men like 13 and up to guys who are like 50 hanging out. And it really, we have a couple of amazing youth organizers who can cultivate a real organic, kind of authentic environment very quickly. I am not a youth organizer, so I can't tell you that magic exactly, but it's magical. Like, it's really amazing. And people come in and it's a space for young men to be safe, to feel comfortable, and to be vulnerable amongst each other and talk about what they're dealing with and what they're seeing in their lives. Other examples, National Night Out, everyone knows that. Crime prevention through environmental design audits, which sounds super dry, but it's actually been a really great way to engage youth with law enforcement. So they hang out together. We have this good survey that came through Safe Growth, and they look and think about their space in a different kind of way, and they give recommendations and get to think through and give right information to people who are making decisions about what the public space looks like. We also do a lot of door-to-door front porch conversations. Last year we talked to 3,300 people on their front porch, and our conversion rate, I'll call it, is about a third. So we got to knock on about 10,000 doors to talk to 3,300 people.
A couple of things about impact. One of the best things that we've seen come from this is that our organizers have started to help organizing other organizers. So in the Harambe neighborhood in Milwaukee, there's probably 10 different organizations that have some kind of community organizing capacity. Some of it's advocacy-based, some of it's not. We're just public safety collective efficacy-based. So she came in and said, no, Adrian Spencer's her name. We're going to get everybody together, let's sit down, let's sync our calendars, let's figure out who's in the right lane with who, and let's stop programming over each other and get to work. And that has been absolutely compelling and so important, right? It's relational, but it doesn't happen until it happens, and you need someone with that vision to make it work. We have, in Milwaukee, we have law enforcement officers that understand that they need partners. And that's really big, and we're very grateful for that. We also had an evaluation done of the first 2 years of our new strategy, 2015-2016, and the outcomes from that were really interesting. It's about trends, it's only been 2 years. We saw an improvement in collective advocacy scores in 6 of our 8 neighborhoods. We do a lot of surveying, but it's and I've done a lot of community surveying, and surveys are terrible almost all of the time. This is it literally takes 3 minutes, and it's a really good conversation starter. It's respectful. It doesn't ask questions that are inappropriate or invasive or presumptuous. It's asking people what they think about their neighborhood and how they feel. In my experience in doing them, people are pretty happy just to start and answer a question. We do 100 twice a year in each of our priority neighborhoods. So this year we'll collect over 2,000 of those, and it's been very helpful in actually helping us measure our impact. We've also found that and this is like not rocket science, okay? Ready? Resident-led initiatives are what work. Period. If you can get CBOs, nonprofit organizations, working together, listening to residents, the results go even up. So that community organization willingness to work together and to listen to what the community is telling them to do is hugely impactful. We want to do more of that, encourage more of that, be part of that, break down walls related to partnerships. It's not easy. People are very annoyed, okay? community organizations, all like, humans are annoying. So sometimes partnership is hard. But we have taken away from ourselves the ability to say, you are annoying and hard to work with, or we don't understand you, so we're going to not work with you. That is not an option. If you are doing good work in the city of Milwaukee, we want to know who you are, and we want to help you do your work. We want to carve out paths for you to do your work, and we want to make things better, because nobody has time for this nonsense, right, between organizations, between people, whatever. Okay, challenges. So building strong partnerships, reminding law enforcement that they need partners. They know, but sometimes they need reminding. It's just the nature, at least right now, it's the nature of the work. So we try to be instrumental in holding that space where we can say, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? And then finally, to say it's a grind, right? It's a game of inches. It's really hard. We have a really good internal intentional staff culture where we can support one another and have a restorative space to go back out and do this work. And then you'll excuse me for this ridiculous picture that's about to come up, you guys. Okay. I said that this is Officer Diener at National Night Out last summer, right? You go to like 5 of them. We're just being ridiculous. I thought his sunglasses were very silly, so I was teasing him about his sunglasses and then the consequences of this picture. So anyway, we do have a technical assistance program. Paul had asked us to speak about if someone's interested in program replication or design or something, if there's a way that we can be useful in that. You can hire us to come help you. If that's too much, right? You can call me, and we can have a conversation about, none of what we do is proprietary. I don't believe there's space for that in the nonprofit and community service world. So if you want a job description, if you want to talk about a program, if you want to talk about, hey, how did you guys do this, or we're thinking about this, what do you think? I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you. The information does not cost money. Sometimes our time does, so that the position is sustainable in the organization. But other than that, please feel free to give me a call or contact me. Bree@safesound.org. There you go. Thank you.
This is not only the panel that you want to be at, this is definitely the panel that I want to be on. I think that this work is the future, where we should be going, looking to reduce the blue footprint and empower communities in the co-production of public safety. I'm starting my presentation with a slide of one of our student leaders. This is Fatima, and she's a student. She's a junior at Rainier Beach High School, and she is one of the leaders of our Corner Greeters intervention. I'm going to talk about that later. But the reason that I'm starting with Fatima is because I'm going to be telling you about a community-led crime prevention intervention in the most diverse neighborhood in Seattle, Rainier Beach. It's in southeast Seattle, and over 160 languages are spoken. And I just want to recognize that it is wholly inadequate that you're learning today about Rainier Beach from a white bureaucrat who works for the city of Seattle, a city that has institutionally racist structures and produces racially disparate outcomes. And so I would like to offer this wish, and I'm glad that David Kennedy is in the room, because I'd like to offer this wish for the next biennial conference. If we are invited to come and speak again about Rainier Beach, I would really love for you all to hear about the work from some of our student leaders, like Fatima or Jeremiah or Nini, who you'll see in slides later on. So that is my wish, and we definitely have a long way to go, but I'm happy to share with you where we've been so far. Again, this is Rainier Beach. Our project is called Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth. That is sort of a mouthful of a title, but it came from the community. Our community leaders who had been working on a neighborhood action plan for Rainier Beach for a number of years really recognized that it is important, the narrative is important, and if it had been me, a researcher bureaucrat naming this project, we might have called it Hotspots of Juvenile Crime in Rainier Beach. But the community felt that it was extremely important to control the narrative, to take control of the narrative, and to really project the image of how they view their community and of their hopes for the community as a beautiful, safe place for youth. And it is a community-led project. It is based on places. So the National Network for Safe Communities works to identify those individuals who are most at risk for victimization and crime. But on our project, we're looking at the places, the individual, very discrete, small places that are most at risk for victimization and crime. And we are applying a data-driven, evidence-based approach to addressing those hotspots of crime. And our approach is community-led. It's all non-arrest strategies. And I'm just going to jump right to the punchline in terms of our outcomes. We've been doing this work since 2013. And we're showing very promising outcomes. We're working with research partners from George Mason University. David Weisberg and Dr. Charlotte Gill are the principal investigators. They're doing a rigorous quasi-experimental evaluation of our project. And Charlotte Gill is working on an article right now with some of our preliminary results. And they are very promising. In Seattle, in general, violent crime has been decreasing since 2013. We're lucky in Seattle. In 2016, there were 12 homicides citywide. Just to put things in context, Seattle's a really safe place. This year to date, there have been 7 homicides citywide. So violent crime in Seattle is going down. In Rainier Beach, violent crime among youth, which is really what the lever that we're trying to change. Violent crime among youth has gone down over 40%. And some of the other findings that we're seeing is that, as in Milwaukee, collective efficacy is improving. And even though this is a community-led, non-arrest approach, police-community relations are improving. So that was a really unexpected finding. So look for Dr. Charlotte Gill's paper on our project. It will be coming out hopefully later this year. Again, we're focused on really small places where crime occurs, and we're really fortunate that David Weisberg, Charlotte Gill, and other scholars have really studied in depth how crime concentrates in small places. They found that in Seattle and in other cities, including Cincinnati, Tel Aviv, just about 5% of the street segments account for about 50% of all crime. And those crime concentrations remain stable over time. So these same places are hot year after year, decade after decade. And you know what I'm talking about, too. Anybody who's worked in community knows that there's a certain intersection that may have been an open-air drug market for 20, 30 years. Or there is a convenience store, just a single building that is a place where crime occurs year in, year out. And in terms of juvenile crime, the researchers found that juvenile crime is even more highly concentrated. So in Seattle, 86 blocks accounted for over a third of juvenile crime, all juvenile crime, for a 14-year period. So we're focused on these places. They're the places, the blocks and the intersections that are in red here. It's 5 hotspots in Rainier Beach. I did want to give a shout out to Jeremy Travis, who is the president of John Jay, and he spoke yesterday welcoming us. When he was the director of the National Institute of Justice, he had a vision for a program called Compass, and it was about community mapping. And his vision was, what if We built the capacity within communities to assemble a lot of data about what their communities look like and put it on maps. So this would be crime data, school data, housing data. What kind of work might evolve, what kind of capacity might grow in communities as a result of having all of this information. So we were really lucky. Seattle was a pilot for the Compass project in 1999, and as a result we have lots and lots of data, like the data on crime concentrations, that there's David Weisberg at the table with Charlotte Gill and myself presenting the information about the concentrations of juvenile crime to our city council in 2011. And as a result, the folks who'd been doing the neighborhood planning for Rainier Beach saw this information and felt like it might be more effective and more just to focus on changing places rather than changing people in Rainier Beach. And they actually called for a hotspots approach to crime prevention in Rainier Beach. And so we took the idea that started with Compass, and we got it, and we broke it down to a very micro level. So what if we put all of that data, all of that rich data that we have in Seattle about crime, about our neighborhood conditions, what if we put it right in the hands of the people who are absolutely most affected in those small hot spots of crime? And that is exactly what we did. We assembled, we had 5 hotspots of crime that we identified in Rainier Beach, and we assembled 5 community task forces that were made up of the people who are most connected to those places. So they're the people who live at those hotspots or who commute at those hotspots, work, worship, send their kids to school at the hotspots. And they were the ones who really looked at the data, analyzed that data, and informed it with their own community wisdom. And these are the people who are most affected by crime at those places, and they're also, unfortunately, the people who are also bearing the brunt of the implications of exposure to the criminal justice system. So it was very empowering to have these folks convene together. There were hundreds of members of our community task forces, and we were very intentional in cultural competency. I facilitated a task force for one of our hotspots, and that task force was the majority of members of the task force were Vietnamese speaking, and so we conducted our meetings in Vietnamese, and then we translated it into English and Spanish. Oh, and I want to recognize, this is Mr. Nguyen, and he's holding hands with Gregory Davis. They're both community leaders in Rainier Beach. Out of the task force work, our partners from George Mason University helped identify 4 types of evidence-informed strategies that are effective for reducing crime at place. And the 4 strategies are increasing guardianship. I want to say these in the order that they're in the program or in my slideshow. Increasing guardianship, changing the physical environment, and Bree talked about this too with CEPTED. Improving collective efficacy, Bree spoke about that as well, and then changing rules and policies. So one of the first things that we did, this is our safe passage intervention. Let's see. And in that picture, you see DeMario and Chris. They are 2 of our community safety specialists. The community safety specialists help the youth in Rainier Beach get after school to their next destination safely. They build relationships with the kids in the community, and it was built on the model of the Safe Passage in LA and Chicago. But what is different about our Safe Passage program in Chicago, they are unable to hire people who have been previously incarcerated or exposed to the criminal justice system. In our case, our Safe Passage workers work through the Boys and Girls Club, and many of them have had exposure to the criminal justice system, and this is their opportunity to give back to the community and to be champions for social justice in the community and to connect with youth in the community. So that's very important for us to hire indigenously our Safe Passage team. They do amazing work. These are the youth, and we call them our corner greeters. So we have 5 hotspots, and we did a big crowdsourcing activity in 2013 where we had hundreds of people gathered, and we did art making and community engagement. And one of the ideas that came up was setting up a greeter stand at each of our hotspots. And so we have these pop-up stands that the youth run. They pop up every Wednesday in a different hotspot, and there is some sort of positive activation to really bring light into places where it has been dark. And they do all kinds of things from Pictionary to origami on this day. Let's see, who's that? That's Jeremiah and Nini. And Jeremiah and Nini were serving different types of bread that represented all of the different cultures in Rainier Beach. So that was cool. And then they also present information about the activities of Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth. This is, we're changing the physical environment. Bree already talked about this. We do septet assessments and then leverage city funding and private funding to do improvements to public and private properties. And so this is a small market on Rose Street, one of our hotspots. And you can see that before it was not very friendly. It was, there was fencing that did not look very welcoming. It was really dark, and so we were able to make it much more welcoming and bright. Collective efficacy. We are really working hard to improve the ability of folks to come together to solve our problems that are common to all of us. And some of that involves our leadership team, and some of that involves having a lot of community celebrations and parties. And this is the end of the year school bash. We have a back to school bash. We have a boo bash. We find lots of reasons to celebrate, which is a way to bring folks together. Another intervention is changing rules. We have implemented positive behavioral interventions and supports. It's an evidence-based framework. It's a non-punitive framework that reduces the need for school discipline, and it improves school climate. So we've implemented that in 4 of our Rainier Beach schools. We have a grant to extend that to 7 schools next year. And we've also decided to extend this to community settings. So positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, is about changing the adult-run systems. And what it's really about is when the adults in the school or the community setting can model and recognize and reward the positive behaviors they see in youth, then the youth will be more inclined to exhibit those positive behaviors. And so we thought, okay, this is great, this is happening in the schools, how about if we extended this into the community settings as well? And so we have some community partners who are working on this as well. This is a gentleman from our one of our corner markets at Rose Street. It's Alam. And Alam, his store is called Alam's Union Market. And when youth come in and they're not pushing and shoving, and when youth open the door for one another, he's going to reward them with a coupon for a free donut at King Donut, which is another small business in Rainier Beach. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we've been able to sustain the work. We've heard a lot over this conference about organizational change. I remember that Pastor McBride yesterday talked about how difficult it is to be working on a cure for cancer when you have to start all over again every 4 years when there's a transition. And we saw a movie about the Oakland Police Department yesterday, but I also learned that in 7 years they had 13 chiefs, so that's a lot of organizational change. And I think really that the key to sustaining a project through all this kind of organizational turmoil is if the project is deeply embedded in the community. So this is the change that we've had in Seattle since we started the project. We've had 2 mayors. We'll have a third because this mayor is not running for re-election. We've had 4 police chiefs, and we're on our 8th captain of the South Precinct. But let me show you this. This is our secret sauce. These are our community leaders, and they have been working on this project with us from 2013 and even before that. So there's a lot of consistency in our community participation. They are truly the secret sauce. And I just want to point out here, this is the first picture where you'll see a police officer. The woman holding the baby, that's Imran, baby Imran, and the person holding him is Sergeant Heidi Tuttle. And this is what the police do on Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth. They are our partners, they're participating, they're holding babies, they are in t-shirts and jeans hauling wood when we have community cleanup events. So that is what policing looks like on Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth. Oh, I just did want to mention about Heidi. This morning we also heard about closing the empathy gap. And I think that this kind of work really does close the empathy gap. I just wanted to end with the idea of community moral voice. Community moral voice is a really important part of the group violence intervention. And on Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth, I believe that we have activated that community moral voice in a fashion that's 24/7 because people in Rainier Beach are experiencing that community moral voice in the shops, in the schools, and from our Safe Passage team. That's the leader of our Safe Passage team, Leonard, and Chris and Roger in the background. And the community moral voice in Rainier Beach looks like love.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Millett from Chicago.
Okay. I wish this mic wasn't working because I'm a football coach and I love shouting at people. Especially ones that I have complete, utter power of influence and control over. So by the end of this session, hopefully I will have power of influence over you. Everybody from Chicago in here, raise your hand, please. All right? Okay. Stephen, you can pass the ballots out now. Everyone from Chicago, take 2 extras, not because we're going to stuff the ballot box, but because we have other colleagues who are in other sessions that need to be represented. I'm joking. You guys can smile a little bit. So
It's a tough crowd.
Thomas.
it is a tough crowd. You guys are a tough crowd. So I will say some things. Is Daryl still in the room? Okay. So I'll say before he gets in here, if the Warriors can get KD, I think we might be able to swing Mama Nia over there. The market is always open. And if we don't get her permanently, maybe we could just borrow some of her time. In the spirit of Mama Nia, I will tell you guys, you might want to retreat some people in here to your safe space because we do believe that everything that we do has to be in conjunction with law enforcement. Law enforcement to us is a critical component and a partner. We believe we share space with them. We believe that they're part of our community. Sometimes they may not see themselves as part of our community. They may feel that they've been pushed out or, they're not respected, whatever the case may be. Our job is just to figure it out. I was taught at an early age about manhood, and the one lesson I learned about manhood that I share with young men now is that being a man isn't about being right. Being a man is very simply, in one phrase, being a man is about making things right. So how do you make things right? And when you do this work, you got to swallow your pride every day. You got to bury your ego every day. It's not that you're still going to feel things, and because you're a human being, right? But I think that's the crux of it. Right here, you're going to see an unbelievable. That's my slideshow. Not because I'm trying to be smarter than everybody else. I've just been outdone by the panel. I didn't know that. I didn't know they were going to throw all that stuff up. I thought the California guys, they got pyrotechnics when they get up on the stage. But that's all we have for the slide, so I'm going to get to that in a moment. But we do the violence reduction strategy in Chicago. It's the Violence Reduction Initiative, GVRI. We call it Violence Reduction Strategy because we have GVRS with the police departments, general order. We have Chicago Ceasefire doing violence interruption. So just not to confuse things and to straighten some things out, we're the Chicago Violence Reduction Strategy. I wasn't kidding about those ballots either, Stephen, but we need to get those around the room. But what we do is really our job is we look at how do you manage the challenge. What's the challenge? We have this incredible challenge we're confronted with, those of us who care anyway, right? And that challenge is urban violence, violence in America. And then we say, okay, it's not really violence in America, it's urban violence. And we say, okay, it's not really urban violence, it's violence in our city, which is Chicago. And then we say, you know what, it's not really violence in the whole city of Chicago. Chicago's 2.5 million people, 22 police districts. It's really 14 districts where you're seeing the violence. And if you if you begin to peel away layers of race and economics, you can see a lot of similarities in those districts. Black, brown, poor, all those types of things. But then we say it's not really just the 14 districts, it's just the gang factions in the districts, which still, it's the group, gang, clique, crew, block, squad, whatever you want to call it, but the dynamic of group violence. So it might be Paul offends me individually on Facebook, right? But I grab Ruth and Bria and Nia to respond. There's a dynamic going on there. What's that about? That's what we're trying to get after. I tell people our job all the time, I have to correct law enforcement, I have to correct community, I have to correct outreach and support agencies, I have to correct the media. Our job is not to eliminate gangs. That's a huge source. Our job is to help eliminate gang violence. There's a difference. Gangs, the issue of gangs doesn't belong to the police department. It belongs to society. There's societal things and I tell people, I don't think the police department's a gang. I don't think the judges are a gang. A gang has a charter that says we're engaged, the purpose of this is criminal activity. That's a gang. So if they have that in their charter, then yeah, I guess they are. But I haven't seen any of those. I know with a lot of our factions in Chicago where, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 all began, they have in their charter 50% of their board membership is for the Department of Illinois Corrections, knowing that this is part of what we're engaging in. So I halt people on that. It's a little bit different. But our thing is we get to the humanity of it. And really, I like I don't know if Daryl used that word today. I know the McBrides. I ran into Ben somewhere, and I thought he was Mike. And I was talking to like he was Mike. This was like a year ago. He's like, no, that's my brother, man. But they're wearing the same uniform, right? It's just Mike wears their white Air Force Ones, though. That's how you can tell Mike. And they're spotless. But no, it really, when you get to the dignity of it, treating people as human beings, treating people as people. I love the morning panel because it really got into this stuff we do it's great, but we look at the work we do on the street and with outreach and with community. But if you look at the work that law enforcement does, a lot of their stuff is kind of gray too when you really peel away their layers. And part of that is you look at, there's no training for when they actually put boots on the ground and get out the car. You could train as much as you want to train, but you're going to engage in certain situations. What do you do with you watch the film on Oakland. At one point, the guy was almost like he was traumatized. The first time he talked to the guy, the guy walked away. The second time the guy came back, he pulled the taser. You know, it's almost like how do you really train and prepare for that? And I think part of it is just relationships, how you view people. You know, I love what Mike McBride said, like if we focus on policing to protect the constitutional rights of those we're policing, and just boom, that's it. Something very short and sweet and very simple. But our job is to manage that. So then you look at, well, it's not just the factions in those 14 districts. It's very few people in those factions. And I say, like, I talk to people all the time. You go out in Chicago and you go out on the street with me tonight, and you see 24 guys out on the street. Guess what? Maybe one of them has a weapon on him. There'll be a weapon on the wheel well. There'll be the community heaters and the garbage cans and in the weeds and that type of stuff. But everybody's not armed, because you know what? If everybody on that street was armed, they would be called a militia. We don't have militias on our streets. We have gangs and factions, but we don't have militias. They have those in, sorry, Detroit. They got them in Michigan and Indiana, like, I love a good fight. You see that, right? Like, I'm going to start. I'm going to push. And I got the microphone. They got to wait to the end when they pass around the microphone. But so we have so we look at three pillars of partnership: community moral voice, outreach and support agencies, and law enforcement. Everyone has an equal platform. It's 33.3 whatever % for everybody. So nobody gets to run the ship. My job is to make sure everybody plays fair in the sandbox, and the guy with the gal with the biggest Tonka truck doesn't get to pick it up and leave when they don't like what's happening, and if there's any type of conflict between the partners, because there will be. We just get after one thing, which is delivering our mission, which is very simple. The violence is unacceptable, won't be tolerated. We'll stop you if you make us. We'll help you if you desire it. What we see is that offer for help in Chicago, we extend it beyond those individuals to family members and to associates as well. And you see, like, if you look at some of our data, we got people walking in, yeah, I know Paul Smith. Okay, who's Paul Smith? You did a custom notification on him. He was at your calling. Okay. Now all of a sudden that individual goes to the top of the line as well. And how do I know this? I'm raising 4 boys. And my wife will tell you, I don't care how much I despise an individual. If they do something from one of my sons, they will always have a seat at our dinner table. So knowing that, it's no real difference there, right? But what we do is we deliver the message of, hey, look, we have to stop shooting. We have to stop this violence. It's a honeymooners type intervention, I say, and it's just basic GVRI stuff. I know that you know that I know who you are, who you're allied with, who you're beefing with, who just got out, what's going on, what's popping on social media right now, how violent you are, how you make your money, all those types of things, how organized you are right now, and we need to stop. We have a lot of our community partners here right now. I'm going to have to get Reagan Harmon, because she's telling how Oakland pays the partners, and everybody in that room turned around and looked at me. But we're getting there. We're getting there. We're trying. But the idea is really, how do we achieve that mission? Number one, we want you to live. That's it. At the end of the day, the outreach, the support, great. You got to live. Number 2 is you stay out of prison and jail. Now, don't like to say this, but I will say it, and I'll be very frank and open with it. If you need a timeout so you can live, so be it. But it's your decision. And I hope you don't expire before that timeout if it's necessary, or no one goes with you. And then number 3 is that you get your life together. But number 1, and we try not to ever confuse it, number 1 is that you live. And we keep coming back, it's that people live. So we look at, so our custom notifications are our door-to-door visits. We got a bunch of different types. The only type I'm really focused on here is our CPRVV, Community Police Response to Victims of Violence. I tell you, I like to be number 1 in everything that we do. Chief Arnold just retired in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which makes us number 1 in Chicago, because he had the crown. Didn't even have to fight him for it. Didn't even have to step in the ring.
I'm going to hurt Chris after this.
But no, I'll tell you that it's a unique door-to-door visit. So these door-to-door visits, it's law enforcement with community members, with outreach and support agencies. We go together, and the message is a joint message. And I take a lot of heat, and people say, oh, you're going to intimidate these guys. You're intimidating these guys. Really? We're offering them, we're telling them The hardest thing is the law enforcement piece, to be honest with you. Like you heard Sergeant Jacobson say from New Haven, if you were in the shooting review panel. Like if you told him 5 years ago, we're going to ask you to go and tell them what you're going to do, and tell them that they're the guys on your radar right now in order to try to save their lives, he'd tell you you're out of your mind. You know, that's going to take all of my edge away from the job that I do. I'm not giving him an advantage. So, you know, but then you see the changes that take place. But law enforcement goes, community goes, outreach and support goes. Maria Pike is with us right now. She's one of the moms that go out with us. We don't wear vests. We don't have badges. You know, we're not armed. I don't know. Steve might be armed. But we're not armed. That's a joke. He's one of the guys that works with us in Chicago. But the idea is delivering this message, delivering it in a dignified manner, and not just like it's just very. This is what we're dealing with right here, and we all know what we're dealing with. Our rule has always been no peas, no press, no politicians, no preachers, because we don't want anyone to take the microphone, take the stand, try to occupy the podium, and usurp the message. The message belongs to the community. Belongs to the community. Now, Bishop Harris in Detroit confronted me this morning and said, you got Pastor Michael Allen, who's in the audience, going out with you. And I said, yeah, you know, part of that is I just say that to spook people to see if it scares them off. You know, if it doesn't scare them off, because you can't be on the street with scary people. You know, you'll get in trouble. You won't make it home. You know, so we that's what we do. But you could see here, custom notification, door-to-door visit. CPRVV, this isn't because of a conflict that's going on. It's not because you're on the top 10 list. It's not because of any of that. It's because you were just a victim of a gunshot. Happen to be a group member. So we go to your door. We go with community members. We go heavy with community. We tell ATF and those parts if they're out with us to stand down. And we go heavy with the community. We just offer what we normally do. You know, is there any help that you need, anything like that? You can see with the door-to-door visits. So we've done 2,500 door-to-door visits in the last 3-4 years. We do group meetings as well. We've done 82 of those in the last 6.5 years with over 2,500 gang members present. So we're very active. I will say this, I don't like to say that there's bad people, but we have a lot of dangerous people in our city. And by dangerous, I mean people willing to pick up a pistol at a moment's notice and have access. We have great access to firearms in the city of Chicago. But you can see there, what's the violent offenses of guys we go door to door with in blue? Because if the whole point is, I'm going to wrap it up right now, but if our whole point is we do community meetings, and we attend over 24 community meetings a month. You know, so we are who we say we are. Those of you who know Denny Green, we are who we say we are. But these door-to-door visits, only 20% of those 2,500 people we've seen have committed a violent offense after we've talked to them. And these people are engaged. You know, when we shake your hand, we don't know, you know, generally... When we shake your hand, gunshot residue may very likely transfer to our index finger. This is who we engage. This is who we love, right? This is who needs to live at the end of the day. So how do you get there? You can see this is a good way. We're good again? Darn. Getting ready to shout. Have everybody come up and take a knee. But you can see here, violent offense, 20% of those guys that we've engaged. It's only 5% of the ones where we brought the moms out, faith-based partners out, and done right after they've been shot. Very vulnerable point in time for a human being. You're facing your mortality. I don't care about Tupac, Biggie, your homies, anybody else. You just got a hole in your body. You are facing mortality. And you're there, again, remember, we're engaging the family. We're not just engaging the individual. It's a family situation. And then you can see, as far as shooting victims, only 10% of those that we've gone door to door, and it's about 60-70% overall with the 2,500. It's 100% with the CPRVVs. 0 have been shot after we've talked to them. And then the last thing that we're looking at there is outreach. And we have Steve and Charles and Maria and Oscar and a lot of partners with us. You win with people, right? I think we got the right people. I think we got the best people. Overall, we got about 30% of the guys we engage ask for help with their family members. With the CPRBV after they've been shot, we're knocking 80%. So what we're recognizing is there's a moment in time here that we need to be smarter about seizing. And we need to really kind of rally everybody who's in this in this field. You know, who occupies this space? You know, we got to stop fighting and saying that this is public safety versus no, this is public health. Well, listen, folks, it's both. You know, it's both public safety and public health. So we need to figure out, in the time being, Mama Nia, how to share this space, everybody together, until we can get to a better place.
Very quickly, Austin. I've been told that our next break is 30 minutes. We have one more panelist. You're in for a treat with Miss Ruth Robbins. Ruthie.
I just wanted to, I'm really nervous, so let me just get my thank yous out the way. I wanted to thank the National Network for Safe Communities and John J. College for inviting Lipstick, and everyone that has supported me to this point, because it's been so great being here for the last 2 days, but I struggled with, do I belong, or does Lipstick belong here? And after sitting on this panel with all these great people, I know that I belong, and I'm grateful to be here. So I'm here today to talk about Operation Lipstick. Stay on time. Okay. So I'm here. Could you hear? All right. So I'm here today to talk about Operation Lipstick. My name is Ruth Rollins, and I am from Boston, Massachusetts. So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about Lipstick and myself, and I can't talk about Lipstick without talking about myself. Born and raised in Boston, I had been doing advocacy for the last 18 years, whether I was supporting family and friends on both sides of gun violence. I'm going to slow down because I'm trying to rush. So for the last 18 years, I have been supporting friends and families that were impacted by gun violence, whether it was through funerals or whether it was through the legal process. Little did I know, in 2007, a tragedy would hit my door. My 21-year-old son, Warren Daniel Hairston, was murdered. He was shot in the head. He went missing on the 21st, and they did not find him until the 25th. Even with that, I was trying to practice some type of forgiveness. I wanted to be part of the solution, and I met a woman named Nancy Robinson. My day job, I am a domestic violence advocate, and they had a campaign, Ladies Involved in Putting a Stop to Inner City Killing. My son's case was never solved. I wanted to know, how does a 14-year-old boy get a gun that never left his housing development? And I need to be honest, and I'm being real transparent, I thought the police were dropping our guns off in our community. I didn't know. It was ignorance. I didn't know how all these kids were ending up with guns. And when I met Nancy, one of the ways, and I need to say one of the ways that we found out, although I am from Massachusetts and we have some of the strongest gun laws, they were buying guns from surrounding states. So what Lipstick does, it addresses straw purchasing. So those that don't know what straw purchasing is someone who buys guns for someone that's unable to get them legally. And through research, we found out that it was a direct result of some of the killings that were happening in our community. So, this is the iron pipeline. It's the gun dealer, the straw purchaser, in some cases. And for me, being a domestic violence advocate, it made so much sense because this is what I was seeing that was happening in our community. I went to the workshop earlier and I shared about old school DV and new school DV. New school DV in my area, what we're seeing a lot of is the young girls hiding, holding, and storing guns. Even the grandmothers that know about the guns in the back room. And the work that Lipstick has been doing has been able to empower and educate women not to take someone else's life. So this is what we consider the iron pipeline. How the straw purchaser buys the gun, they distribute it to our community, and there's always a victim at the end of the gun. So, there's been talking a lot about police. Our district attorney in the Boston area has been very, very supportive with Lipstick. He works closely with us. He credited us with reducing crime guns. He credited us by reducing crime guns by women by 33%. We also was part of a MBTA campaign. I don't know if you guys can see it here. That ran for about 9 months in the Boston area. His Crime, Her Time, which was very instrumental with supporting other women and getting women involved. So meet the Lipstick ladies. These are a lot of, well, these are half of them. A lot of different women that it's not survivor driven, although there are a lot of women that are affected by gun violence in our community. So you have domestic violence advocates, you have hair salon people, you have people that work in community programs, you have people that work with juvenile programs. This woman right here is Patricia. Tricia is a Mary Kay lady. She brings the Lipstick message into her everyday work as well. So part of our workshop, we have this young lady, and that was an aha moment for me. It was an aha moment for everyone. That is a video that plays, and her name is Rashonda Riley, and it's on YouTube. She shares how she bought 40 guns for her classmate. And they found the guns in New York, and she was prosecuted. She lost her scholarship. She ended up doing, I don't know if she got jail times or probation. But what happened with that video, for the community, I need to say, because I'm from the urban area, that it put a name to what was happening in our homes, or a lot of people's homes, or, you know, because I think about the war on drugs, right? Back in the day, people were holding drugs and hiding them for their boyfriend, but it's a different day. So what I see in our community, a lot of women that we deal with, we see in the workshops, is upgraded. So a lot of these women are hiding, holding, and storing guns for their loved ones. Well, Rashonda has been one of our biggest cheerleaders in terms of outreach and working with women. Most recently, she's working with women that are incarcerated. She's one of our Lipstick ladies as well. Okay, so the next video. So what does Lipstick do? It educates and empowers women not to be involved in that type of behavior. We do advocacy, we go into the community, we meet people where they're at. We call it Department Youth Service in Boston. We go to juvenile places, we go to schools, we go to churches, we do workshops. This one right here is a beauty day event. So we were doing nails and doing lashes, that people were coming in and being educated and informed in regards to straw buying, and we had over 3,000 women sign pledges. So, this is one of our workshops, and we talked about policing. So our policing has been, we work well with the district attorney, the mayor, the governor. Most recently, we were featured in the People's Magazine. We've been doing a lot of great work, but in terms of our community, I call them officer friendlies. We had 2 officer friendlies, and one of them was in the picture in the back. That was part of supporting us and the women in the room. So let me give you a snapshot. There was a lot of talk about trauma and mental health, and for some reason in our community, when we mention that word, there's a stigma around it, right? So we like to call it the thing, whatever that may be, whatever you want to heal from, whether it's sexual abuse, domestic violence, any type of trauma things that you went through. And in our workshops, something would happen. It was like people were taking ownership in regards to the gun violence in their home, because it was a non-judgment zone. So you had mothers talking about guns being in the back room, you had young girls coming forward, you had everyone saying their involvement with gun violence. And for me, it was part of my healing process. again, I am a survivor, and I need to say that my son that was murdered was driving some of the violence in our community. And what tends to happen with the media and the police, we got this thing with good victim and bad victim. But I need to say that all our babies matter. And through Lipstick, I'm only one of many. I mean, I was very instrumental in starting this program, myself and Nancy Robinson, and we've trained hundreds. And we've saved lives, and one of the great things, you can go back, one of the great things that we have by having the police in there, he had a job to do, but he would support those women. He couldn't take the guns, but we could leave them in a disclosed location. He would support them. He would go. It was like community policing. Why was he supporting us? Because he was a pillar of the community. And there's no judgment. He was invested in the community. So he came to our workshops and he helped us. We're talking about mothers. We're talking about sisters. We're talking about people that was involved in this behavior. And for some reason in our community, it's the norm. But Lipstick created an environment that it was safe. If you loved them, we loved them too. If you hate them, we hate them too. But how can we support you to break that behavior? So with that, and part of my healing, and I need to, like I said, I was really nervous with, but you know, I think I share that I am one. I am the statistics that you guys talk about. And I have a tagline that your past does not have to be your future. So I talked about my Danny, and like when I was doing all this work with and just my story, there's plenty other mothers just like me. That when I was doing this work, and there was so many mothers in the room, and when I bring my son, because when my son died, they didn't talk about him, they put his criminal record in the paper. So it wasn't about my child, but I knew his life mattered. And when I did that, what happened was I suffered for a while in silence. But it wasn't until I brought my Danny into the room, there was countless other mothers that was going through the same thing. And it was a platform of healing. So Lipstick created an opportunity for healing. But with that being said, as I touched and empowered other mothers and other people that were affected both ends on gun violence, I need to say, like, I was still suffering in silence. My story's a little different. I'm that mother that was affected on both ends. So my oldest son was incarcerated for 10 years. So here it is, I'm doing all this work, locally, nationally, in People's Magazine, and I'm getting all this support as a survivor. But there was nothing for the victim's mom. But what I realized is what you do to one side, you have to do to another in order to break that cycle of violence when it comes to community. So Lipstick helped me find my voice. But I'm not, I stand here today, there's so many women like me in Boston that have been empowered, that has not let this, you know, like, just left the building. And that's my truth. You know, and I know the verdict is still out. You know, like, we have women in the room. Like, you know, like, I asked a few people to just sit in so I could just look at them, because when you talk about this work and you're among law officials and you're along, the verdict's still out, right? Amen. There's still that stigma. It's still bad victim, good victim, or whatever, but then that cycle of violence just continues. So my theory is, if you touch that mother, if you touch that sister and lift them up, you can interrupt that cycle of violence. And we heal as a community, right? But if you put a Band-Aid on the survivor, and then the victim, the perpetrator's mom, her son's locked up, and she got 3 more kids at home, and she turned her life around, she's doing well, and she's working, but I call it guilt parenting. She's guilt parenting, and they got all the guns in the back room. But we're not working with her to break that cycle, right? So I believe what we do on one side, we have to be and don't get me wrong, I ain't always been here, but I know that the part of this work, so, and I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored that Nancy invited me here. So through my healing and my work, I created a program, We Are Better Together, the Warren Daniel Healson Project. I am still a lipstick lady. I walk with lipstick. I support. I go out and speak anytime. But through my journey and my accountability, because I need to be honest. Before my son died, I found guns in the home. But I came from the stigma. What happens in the house stays in the house, and it was a lie. I needed to take ownership about what happened on my watch. And it was painful, but I did. I started peeling the layers. Like I'm a survivor of many things. But what I realized, for me, I do this work in honor of my Danny and all babies that have been lost to gun violence and our babies that are incarcerated. So I created this program, We Are Better Together, the Warren Daniel Houston Project, and it's to educate and support families on both sides, so nobody's feeling victimized. And my goal is to create a 6-part series in terms of healing. So my tagline is the truth. Your past does not have to define your future. So that's my presentation, and the last slide is lipstick, all about helping women to keep guns off the street.
Thank you for today. And let me say this. Ruthie, that's what those of us who love her call her, Ruthie, you do belong in this room, and you are a part of this network, and we appreciate you for sharing your story. A lot of us get paid to do what we do. Baby, you just paid us big time today. Thank you.